Hi, thanks for joining us for the Love Soul Movement podcast. I wanted to introduce this next series that's coming up. We'll have a couple of episodes in 2021 and then take a break for a few weeks and then come back with more episodes of the Strength in Women series that we're doing. It started off as a workshop. We were going to do a divine feminine workshop and talk about what it's like to be in your feminine, be in the soft feminine, especially after being in a masculine energy or a masculine role for most of your life. And what I realized with everything that had happened to me this year and everything that happened this summer, that what I was actually doing was collecting stories. And I was collecting stories of women who are extremely strong from all different backgrounds. And it gave me a lot of hope. And I decided that this is what we needed to do to celebrate life. So here we are. It's the holiday season. And I want to introduce the Strength in Women series. We're going to have a really good time doing this. I hope you enjoy these podcasts and interviews and conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. And we'll see you really soon. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another Love Soul Movement podcast. I have an adorable guest with me today. Jess is with us today. She is an amazing person. Let me get her bio here really quick first of all, she's a poet. That's how I noticed Jess on Twitter, the poetry that she writes. But Jess is a poet, forced therapy guide, an unschooling mom of 3, a passionate student and channel of the esoteric wisdom and physics of the human heart. She uses the modalities of creative writing and forced therapy to invite others to slow down, return to their bodies, and to make space within to hear the direction of their own hearts. Jess also facilitates the Happy Little Trees Forest School at Roots and Wings Homeschooling Village in the Hudson Valley of New York. She's very busy, but it's so funny. I thank you so much for being here. You are like the softest energy that I have ever come across. Like, I feel like I'm on Twitter just making these large, like boom, 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 giant, like feet walking all over Twitter. And then I see a post from you and I'm like, oh my God, that's just so soft. And it softens everything about like where I was 2 seconds ago.
Oh, thank you.
So I, for one, appreciate your presence and energy that you put out. So I introduced you with your bio. I would love to hear a little bit in your own words about yourself and kind of the things that you do.
Where do I begin?
Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a mom. So I have 3 kids and they range in age from 10 to down to 6. And so that's like the priority thing that I am.
Yeah.
But I am also a writer. I'm a poet, as you already said. I teach part-time at the Roots and Wings Homeschooling Village. It's more like I'm present there with the kids and kind of creating a gentle boundary for them to explore all day. So I do that 2 days out of the week. And I've just started doing different events and workshops with kids at the village. And what else? I mean, forest therapy. So that's a newer thing for me, but it's picking up really quickly. I think it's just one of those things that it's kind of like one of those things that's like dormant inside of you until you come across it, and it sparks all of this remembrance. And so forest therapy and the Happy Little Trees Forest School, which I do 1 day a week out of the Roots and Wings Homeschooling Village. So that's relatively new as well. So yeah, I mean, I say that's it for now. It's not it. And also the heart stuff. So I started a community on Patreon called the Trove, and it's like it's hard to explain, but it's like a teaching platform slash where all of my channelings that have to do with the human heart, that's where I put all of that. So, and then as you go up in the tiers, it's like, you know, there's forest therapy walks and all of those things that I offer anyway, as a part of like how I hold container with people. So
nice.
yeah.
Well, and so this is a perfect lead way into the heart story, because when I found out that you were a heart mom, I mean, I've spoken with other heart moms before, but I will never be able to understand what that's like. And you have such a connection to what the heart physically does and how it works in our spiritual life and our emotional life and just everywhere. It's just not just an organ in our body that pumps blood. So
Right.
I'm really excited to hear your story.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start at the beginning.
Let's talk about the heart. I'm
um
just gonna sit here and be like, okay.
yeah, I mean, and if you have questions, like please feel free to interrupt, because like sometimes I rush through the story, and you know, I used to spend a lot of time talking about it, and you know, gradually over time it's just be morphed into something else. But yeah, let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So my second child, Dakota, she was born on January 1st in 2014, and about 20, it was like the anatomy scan 20 weeks into my pregnancy with her. I think that landed us right around September, October of 2013 is when I was in for my anatomy scan, and this was my second baby. So I had done this before, right? I had gone through all of this before. And I remember sitting there and they were doing the scan, and they don't tell you much when you're in there. They point things out here and there, but they don't really tell you much. And I remember sitting in there, and the woman got up, she left the room, and I'm sitting in there with my sister-in-law at the time. And I remember counting the chambers, and I was only counting 2 chambers of the heart. And I kept counting 1, 2, 1, 2. And I'm like, where are the other 2 chambers? Like, that's not what the heart looks like. Not from what I remember from, you know, school biology. That's not what I remember. And then it was like everything changed at that moment, because the doctors came in and said, okay, the heart is not developed. The heart's not fully developed. Only one side is developed. This is called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. You need to see a specialist tomorrow. And yeah, and from there it was meeting with doctors, learning about what the possible trajectory would be for someone diagnosed with HLHS. That's, you know, the abbreviation for hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And it was interesting because, so I live in New York State in the Hudson Valley. So like, you know, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the New Paltz area. That's typically, people tend to know where that is. So I remember going to see a fetal cardiologist. That, I don't know if it was the next day, if they could get me in the next day, but it was definitely that next week. And everything was very blurry. You know, you're being bombarded with all of this new, it's like culture shock with this new language, and a language that you don't know, that you're not familiar with, which is wild to me, by the way, because it goes to show how little we know about our hearts. When you're hearing about this and you're like, I can't keep up with the understanding of this.
Yeah.
And I remember the cardiologist was telling me, and my, you know, her father, that, you know, this is a statistical phenomenon. You did nothing wrong, but this happens. It can happen. And this, yeah, okay. And I'm like, you know, what do you do? And and he's telling me like, okay, your daughter will need to have 3 open heart surgeries. Like, that is, we know that that's for sure. With HLHS, they need these 3 open heart surgeries. From there, life is going to be really hard. And this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be extremely, extremely limited. And so let me know what you want to do. Do you want to abort the pregnancy? And I felt like with this particular doctor, it was a lot of pressure in trying to kind of persuade us into doing that. And I just knew, even though it was overwhelming, there were no answers, there was no plan. I knew at a much deeper level that this was purposeful.
Yeah, you were
You
her
know why?
mom.
Yeah. And I said, if this is how this baby is coming into life, this is how this baby is meant to come into life.
Right.
And I don't know why, but I know that it's on purpose.
Right.
And even then, like I wasn't very connected to myself at that time. I wasn't very connected to spirituality or anything like that. But I knew that deep down, right? Because that's something that's already there. And so from there, we made plans. I have family outside of Boston. So we ended up at Boston Children's Hospital, which is like, they're amazing when it comes to cardiac care. So right after Christmas time, I went up to Massachusetts with my oldest, who was 2 at the time, and stayed with family. I was supposed to have Dakota at the end of January, but 2 days after I got to Massachusetts, my water broke.
Wow.
And yeah, thank goodness I was up there.
She's probably been doing things her own way her whole life too.
Oh yeah, it's true. She has a lot of Capricorn,
Nice.
lots of Capricorn in her chart, and so yeah, the stubbornness is real. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my water broke. I ended up going to the hospital, and I was in labor, and I wasn't supposed to be having her vaginally, but I was in labor, and I knew it was like I had such tunnel vision. As soon as my water broke, I had such tunnel vision that I didn't know what would happen. She had to have an open heart surgery a couple of days after being born, so I didn't know if I was going to be able to hold her,
right,
and or how long, or any of these things. And I knew that, having had a C-section before, that I had a really, really rough experience my first pregnancy, and I didn't get to hold my baby for like 2 days or to even see her. So I was like, I'm going to hold this baby.
Yeah.
She's going to feel my presence outside of the womb, and I'm having her the way that she wants to come into the world.
Yeah.
And I just remember having such focused energy this whole process until she came out, and it was like, there she is. And I did get to hold her for about 5 minutes. And then the hospital that I was in was connected to the children's hospital by a bridge. And all the doctors came in, and they took her, and the nurses, and then they wheeled her across this bridge. And so I was in the hospital with her dad, recovering, and then until I could walk across the bridge, and which was like the next day, I think. And got to see her, and she went into her first open heart surgery at 3 days old.
Wow.
And yeah, and at that time, it was, like I said, I wasn't very connected to myself. And you're recovering from birth, which is a whole event.
Very difficult. Yeah, that's not fun.
Yeah, and we don't have a lot of that support that we probably should have,
right,
as mothers. And so her dad had to go back to work in New York, so I was by myself. And
you already had a 2-year-old.
I had a 2-year-old, but she also went back with family. Thank goodness. Like, we had a lot of support as far as family goes here and up in Boston.
I remember that. I had a 2-year-old and a newborn at the same time, but yours was a much different story.
Oh, for sure. It's tough. Everybody has their own circumstances,
Yeah.
But yeah, so she had her open heart surgery, and then after that, it was recovery. And recovery is like, you don't know how things are going to be. You don't know how long you're going to be there for. And it's in this recovery, I was also trying to learn, like, just her her needs. I was,
Yeah.
of course, it's a baby, they have, certain needs, but I was trying to like learn the certain cries and how I could best comfort her, especially since I couldn't pick her up.
Mm-hmm.
She was covered in wires and tape and all kinds of things for a couple weeks. And I just remember feeling like I was on autopilot. And I felt I knew that something wasn't okay inside of me, but I also felt like it would be selfish for me to even talk about that, because here's my new baby going through this whole entire like
Oh
traumatic
my God, that must have been
experience.
so lonely.
It was it was
Ugh.
incredibly lonely. And it's, when you're in recovery at these children's hospitals, many children's hospitals, you share a room with another family.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember experiencing this social anxiety that I had never experienced in my life. Like, it was so bad that the family on the other side of the room had like direct access to the bathroom, like you share the bathroom. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember like going out into the hallway bathroom and not like, I did not want to interact with people. I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
talk to anybody. I didn't want anyone to talk to me. When people did talk to me, I just like shut down completely. And it was just, but there was the second family that moved in at like, so we were there for about 3 weeks in this recovery room. And at the end of that stay, there was another family in there. And it was this mother who, they were from like the other side of the country. And she used to come in, and all of the old, because she must have had this baby, and she had all of these older children, and they would come during the day to visit their new sibling, and they would all sing this one song together, and it was Somewhere Out There
Oh,
Beneath.
I love that song.
And every time they would sing this song, I was on the other side of the curtain. I would quietly, silently be sobbing, because I almost felt like they were singing to me and they didn't know it. And I don't think they knew how much I needed that in that moment. And I don't think I even realized then how much that helped me and kind of anchored me through the experience of being there. So that was the first recovery period. And then we came back home to New York. And the first few weeks at home, it was like, I don't even know how to explain it, but every hour on the hour for 24 hours a day, every day of the week, I would have to measure Dakota's weight, her length. I would have to weigh all of her diapers and keep track of all of the times that she ate anything, and send that information over to her medical team at Boston.
Wow.
And take care of a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And their dad was working nights, and it was like,
oh wow,
I was on serious autopilot. And it got to a point where, so that was February, we came home in February, and sometime in March, I had such a moment where I did not want to be here anymore. And I don't think I realized how deeply I was spiraling inside, without asking for help. And there was one day when I ended up sitting on our bathroom floor for about 3 hours. He was at work and the baby was crying. My Sadie, she's my older daughter, she was looking for me, and I was in the bathroom, not crying, it was just a shell. I felt like a shell of a person. I could not remember memories from the morning, what I ate for breakfast. I couldn't remember anything.
Wow.
And I couldn't tell you like what my favorite color was. I couldn't tell you anything about myself and about anything that I was doing. I was not present in my body at all. And I remember sitting in the bathroom, not wanting to be here, feeling really sorry for myself, to be honest. Like, why is this happening to my family? Why is this happening
Mhm.
to my child? I cannot handle taking care of a baby like this. She is so fragile,
Mhm.
and um we don't even know what life will be like with her, and I'm afraid of messing it up. I'm afraid of hurting her, or ruining everything.
Yeah.
And so much so that, like, and on top of healing from birth, and
Oh,
just
yeah.
new adjustment in motherhood, um
Absolutely.
and not having any kind of, I didn't have like any kind of community support at that time.
Right.
And so it was just like, you just soldier through it, and that's it.
I know. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he came home from work and came up the stairs. Our stairs are like, the front door and the stairs and the bathroom door are all aligned. And I remember him pounding on the door. And finally he got the door open and saw me sitting there. And I always talk, when I talk about this, and I'm trying to relate, like, I don't see this as a bad thing, but he did not help me. He did not help me. And it's a
Mhm.
blessing that he did not help me. He was angry with me, and he was angry that I was there and the babies were crying and I wasn't doing anything. And I would, you know,
Mhm.
but him being angry with me required me to sit there with myself.
Yeah.
And him not helping me up off the floor required me to sit with myself, even in the state that I was in. And I remember just sitting there thinking, like, what's the point in any of this? And suddenly I heard something inside of me audibly that said, stand up. You do not have to know what to do after that. Just stand up.
Yeah.
And so I stood up. And I remember, like, gripping the side of the counter. I couldn't even look myself, like, in the mirror. I couldn't look at my reflection in the mirror. I just could not.
Yeah.
And then I heard this voice again, and it was like, what's one thing that you can hold on to in this moment? What's one thing?
It's amazing, that voice that'll keep you alive,
It really
isn't
is.
it?
And I had to almost empty out in a way to be able to even hear that,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
You
So
needed the 3
sure,
hours.
I
Yeah.
did. And here, I had all of this guilt that I was sitting there and the babies were crying, but actually maybe that's what saved me, to help
Mhm.
them,
Yeah.
And so it was just like, and I, it was that voice that was like, what's one thing that you can hold on to? And the only thing that I could really see were my baby's eyes, like, right, Dakota's eyes, Sadie's eyes, and how they perceive me through their eyes. It was like this instant knowing that they don't see anything wrong with me.
Right.
They don't. They see me as their mom, as their
Mhm.
mother, as their source. And that that was enough to be like, okay, I need to just stand here, and I don't have any answers. I don't know what to do. And then again, that voice came back and said, just take the next step. Where is the place that you feel like you can just be not okay,
Mhm.
where it's safe to be not okay? And for me, there was one time when I was pregnant with Dakota, when I went to a group meditation,
Nice.
community meditation. And these meditations were held every 2 weeks on Sundays. And I have to give a shout out. It was Deborah Hanlon. She's a psychic medium here in the Hudson Valley. She had a place called the Center of Being, Knowing, and Doing. That place saved my life. It saved my life. That community of people saved my life. Um,
Is it
and
still there?
it's not. She closed it down during the pandemic, but
Oh, that's a bummer.
she's still doing things in the area. So, like,
Good.
she was my gateway into myself.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yeah. Um, and so I took myself to this meditation, and it was the first time where I sat in a circle of people I didn't know, and I said out loud, and it wasn't therapy, but it was therapeutic for sure.
Mhm.
And I was able to say, like, I am in a really bad place. I don't know who I am. I want to know who I am, but I don't know where to start. And I'm not okay. And it was like people raising their hands saying, I've been there. I've been there too. I'm there right now, and it's like knowing that you're being witnessed from a place of non-judgment, knowing that you're being witnessed from a place of like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. We've all been in situations like this, and we're just going to hold you as a community. And you just show up and you continue to show up. And it doesn't have to get better overnight, because it probably won't.
Yeah.
But you just show up. And that it happened for me, gaining this momentum happened for me very quickly. And I think it's because I was so desperate to touch something inside of myself that could allow me to feel like I was alive again.
Totally understand that.
Yeah. It's like how the soul is always persisting,
Oh,
no matter what the human is doing. The soul is like, nope, you're still a pillar of light.
Whether you like it or not. Here you go.
Exactly. And so, so Dakota's second surgery was that June. And so between March and June, I had been going to these meditations, and I had started going to metaphysical classes that were held at the center. And then I was certified Reiki level 1. All of this compounded into a couple of months' time. And what I noticed is that when I went back with her for that second open heart surgery, is that my perception, like the circumstances were all the same, okay? But the way that I was perceiving them was vastly different. The way I was perceiving my role in them was vastly different. And it became more like I was aware at that point that the first time around, I felt so out of control that I was trying to control everything. And because I couldn't control everything, I made it a story about myself.
Yeah.
And about what it all meant in terms of like why this was happening to me and to us, right? Yeah. And I started to just pay attention to what I could control. It was my breath, honestly. That was it. My breath and the things that I was saying to myself when I was aware of that. And there was also a little garden called the Prouty Garden, and it's not there anymore at Boston Children's, but it was on the first level. And that was like my reprieve. And I would go out there as often as I could, usually when Dakota was asleep or during the rounds, right? So when the nurses were there. And that was my time to just disconnect from the hospital and connect into me.
Yeah. To be able to exist.
Higher. Right.
Yeah.
And then I would gather myself together, and then I would return back to her room and do what I could in that space. And I became very aware that however I'm showing up here within myself is going to affect Dakota. It's going to affect her recovery. It's going to affect whatever's happening in this space.
Yeah. The nurse is coming in, the doctor's working on her, everything. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you don't necessarily have control of those things, but you have control, like how you're reacting or responding to any of it. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? You're not going to be perfect at it, but to be aware of like, does this feel good for me to respond or react this way? Like if it doesn't, then let me find a new way to approach this. So it really became just taking care of myself in that way. And
gosh, and that's so important, because even moms that don't go through all of the, because that's traumatic what you went through with her. And I hope that, like, I'm glad that you honor that too, that part of it too. But man, moms need to hear that, that you have to take care of yourself. And it is not celebrated in this society that we have for mothers to take care of themselves. It just isn't. The fact that Like I had a difficult birth with my third child and I got 2 extra weeks with him before I went back to work. And it was like, really?
2 weeks,
Only 2 extra
2
weeks?
weeks
That's
is
it?
not.
Thanks. I mean, it was 8 weeks total, but 6 weeks plus 2 more weeks is, I mean, I only got 2 months with my child before I had to go back to work. And so, yeah, so I'm really glad you said those words because it's so important for women to hear that.
It is. It is. And then like, after that, well, actually, and I don't know if this happened the second surgery or the third surgery. So the third surgery that she had was right before her third birthday. And at this point, I'm starting to really find my own voice. I'm starting to return back to the things that I love, because that was the other thing, right? So I'm sitting in the recovery room with her. And there was one time, like one day or night when she was asleep, and I was watching her little belly, like up and down, and the little wires connected and everywhere. And I started to write. And I hadn't, I'm a writer. I've been writing since I was a kid. That's just how I process the world, right? And,
Mhm.
and myself and my relationship to it. And I hadn't written in a really long time. So I started carrying around this little red notebook all around the hospital. And I'm sitting next to her, and the lights are down low, and I'm writing in this book. And I start asking this question and writing the question: if her life is not guaranteed to be long, then what are we doing? Right? Because if it's just, she has a diagnosis, right? She
Mhm.
has a condition, and I don't know if she'll live a long life. I don't know
Mhm.
if she'll transition before I do.
Yeah.
I don't know. And there's no way for me to know that.
Right.
But then I realized, like, okay, she has what I call like the fine print, right? The disclaimer as soon as she
Mhm.
got here, that hi, I might not have as long as you typically would have, um, for the average person. So, but then I realized, like, I've lost people in my life, right? One of my best friends passed when she was 17 years old. She had no condition.
Mhm.
It's just that's when it was supposed to happen. And so I was sitting there and I was like, well, maybe the length of time here isn't what's important. And if that's not what's important, then what is? And over time, I've learned, it isn't about the length of time. It's about the depth in the moment of time. It's about how deep are we willing to be here in this moment?
Right.
How much texture of life do we want to feel right now while we're here, and feeling it, and having the ability to perceive it. And then I
That's
started
such a Sagittarius thing to do, sitting in a hospital room. Have that thought.
asking philosophical questions. What else? Going down my own rabbit holes.
Yeah.
um, and then, then that question turned into, okay, so if my child and all of my children are going to not necessarily listen to what I'm saying, but watching me live my life, and what it is that I'm embodying,
Mhm.
then what kind of example am I setting?
Yeah.
Is it one that I want my daughter in her potentially shorter lifespan to embody?
Yeah.
And the answer I was being really honest with myself, was no.
Mhm.
Not at all. I was disconnected from all of the things that I loved. I didn't even know what I loved. I didn't know myself deeply. And I was just kind of floating on the surface, doing the things that everybody else seemed to be doing, and that seemed to work. And
Right.
people would
Yeah.
get by, and this is how life goes. You just go down the checklist, and these are the things that mean success. These are the things that we're supposed to do. And but why is that not enough? And is that really taking me deeply into this moment? It's not.
Mhm.
And so then I started to say to myself, as an individual, like, what is it that I could start doing to start connecting to myself? And for me, it was, I had been going to grad school for like my third round and try and attempt for education. And I could not do it. My heart wasn't in it. It felt like the thing that I was supposed to do with a bachelor's in English. And so I dropped out of that graduate program and I said, I just want to write. I want to be a writer. Of course, I went back to school for this, which you don't necessarily have to do, but that's the thing that I felt called to do in that moment. And that night, I searched for all the grad programs I could do from home for a master's degree in creative writing. And I started to put together my applications. And I applied to different schools and I went back to school for creative writing as a full-time master's student from home.
Wow.
Children.
With 2 babies.
Yeah. We can do hard things.
Yeah. That sounds so familiar. I remember doing that with psychology degree. Yeah.
I feel like sometimes your heart is so on fire for something that you just find a way. It just works.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And between that moment, and then I don't even know if it happened during the third surgery, but there was another moment that I experienced that changed my life. It was a blip of a moment, but I was carrying around this red journal, and it was rounds in the morning. So I went down to the lobby in the hospital, and I was getting breakfast. And I brought my breakfast over to there's this one part of the lobby where there's a big fish tank. And so I had been like just watching people come in and come out all morning long. And there were these 3 children that I noticed standing in front of the fish tank, probably right around the ages of like 5 to 7. And I also noticed that not one of them spoke the same language as the other. And I'm like, okay, I'm just like observing.
Yeah.
And you could see like where their parents were. Their parents seemed kind of, apprehensive of each other because there's that language barrier, and people from all over the world come to Boston Children's Hospital. There, you will see walks of life from everywhere.
Right.
And and I was watching these kids and they couldn't understand each other, but they were making this eye contact and connecting and they were playing and chasing these fish up and down this fish tank. And suddenly I was filled with this warm, tingly champagne bubble feeling. and I wrote in my journal, I think I just saw what God is. And it became very apparent to me, just in that moment, that it doesn't matter the words that we speak, the language that we speak, that isn't the truest language. What's underneath that? And I realized that these children were connecting on a pure moment of bliss and joy and love.
Without words.
Without words. And I realized that anything that is not that is taught. And it's taught over a long period of time. But it's not who we are. Right. And who we are is what was happening between those kids because they weren't taught otherwise. And it was like watching all of these imaginary walls drop down between the parents as soon as they saw what was happening with their kids. And I had this moment when I'm sitting there and I realized that week when I was just like contemplating on this moment that I witnessed, that, when you come to the children's hospital, you're coming there for one thing. You're coming there because you love your child. And you're coming there for life, and you're coming there for hope and possibility. Yeah. And that's it. And we're all coming into this space where it's really, really challenging to be.
And scary.
And scary. And it's not uncommon to you yourself or another parent or caregiver to walk out of a bathroom crying
Yeah.
with nowhere to go and no one to hold you.
Mhm.
And you start to lean on strangers and you realize that divine is present in all of it. And that's where you really start to see um what we're doing here. That's my belief, but like what we're doing here in this life. And it's, it's relationship, and it's learning how to just love better, and to, love ourselves and hold ourselves better so that we can hold each other better. And so that moment shifted so much for me. um and since then, Dakota had, that was her third surgery, and right before she turned 3, so she's about to turn 8 on January 1st, on New Year's Day. And
Yay.
she has like her heart checkups, but she is on 1 baby aspirin a day. That is what she is on, which is
That's amazing.
unheard of, to be honest.
Yeah,
And
and because I've seen videos of her being so active, and the pictures that you put out, and I'm like, that she's just amazing. But
yeah,
it's fascinating to me.
she's truly,
She's literally learned she taught her body how to use a heart with 2 chambers like it's 4, like it's a normal heart. That's
right.
insane.
And in a way, she has taught me how to be here, to actually be here, and to be here on purpose. So something that I was told would be extremely limiting for not only her, but for our family and for myself as a mother. And, this statistical phenomenon, I wrote a poem about this actually, is that that's if we want it to be limiting, it will be limiting. And I was starting to build a home for myself in that narrative. And, it's just, how can I make something beautiful with what's really, really hard? And, and let it be what it is.
Yeah. I actually learned a lot from the things that you're saying, because of the difficult year that I myself have been through, and having to relearn how to love yourself through those phases and through all of that is, I mean, it's amazing, because like, she's just an example of just like knowing how to exist in a world that is not friendly and is not, and it can be friendly, and it can be fun, and it can be amazing, and it can be full of love. But there's just so much that we've seen as adults that I loved, that she's like a wonderful reminder that that's all really that exists, is the love and the community and the coming together. So
yeah, for sure.
And I mean, you're so right. Like, the funny thing is it the amount of time that we're here, the amount of impact that she's already had in her tiny little life is, and it's not a tiny little life, it's huge. And that she impacts people every single day. So, and that's a huge testament to you too, because the way that you mother her shows her too how to lead through it.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah,
for sure.
I remember I saw a tweet that you had one day, and I think that you were having kind of a rough day, and I don't know if it was Dakota or if it was another one but they came in and they asked how you were doing, or they said something like, "Mom, do you have a really big energy right now?" And you're like, "Yes, I'm in a really big energy." And so they closed the door and left you alone. And I was like, see, and that's the thing, is like, we're not projecting onto our children and getting angry with them. We're saying, mommies have bad days too.
Yes, and exactly. And it's so important for them to see us being human.
Yeah.
So that they know that they're human.
Yeah.
Is totally acceptable. And, the thing that I like to teach my kids is like, and just by embodying it and practicing it in my life. And it's not always easy. We don't always get this right. But, I can have really big feelings. Really uncomfortable feelings. I can be angry, but I don't have to hurt you with my anger.
Yeah. And I'm still learning that. Like, I have a 20-year-old, my oldest is 20, and I'm still learning that as well. That's, and he and we have like a different kind of relationship, of course, now that he's older than we used to. But we still have we can still butt heads so many, and so I even this week was a huge reminder to me that he and I are so alike in so many ways that we will like cut you down with some words if we really are in that moment. So yeah, like such a good reminder too.
Yeah, for sure. And I hear that. Like I have a temper myself. And and, which is funny because actually out of all of us, Dakota is the one with, the greatest anger and will definitely project that out.
Yeah.
And so it's,
she's well, and that's good though, because that kind of like her standing up for herself already, or like being that willpower, that kind of power that she has, that's going to get her through some things
for sure. And it already has, so it's, I'm always like, let's not tame that out of you. No,
we have to keep the wild in the women.
Let's just like talk about how we can channel it and express it and move it. And then it's perfectly fine for it to be there.
Yeah. So we've talked about you in your poetry and the book All at Once that I got. And I don't remember, I mean, this year's been kind of a blur, but I think I got it earlier this year. Like I think it was right before I went into the hospital at the end of April. And I had read through it so many times that I was like, oh my, I just have to put it away. So, because I wanted to come back to it and feel it all over again, like down the road. And so when I forgot about it, that I put it on the shelf after I'd read through it so many times. And I went through it again today and found the poem that I wanted to read. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and so, there are parts that hurt. I've named them well since arriving, each place that makes me human. Yet I see the children and I open my chest to the sky. A shaking fury begins to rattle up from the pit of me. The mother says, I see you. You sound so much like your mother. Sharing in her tears, her large enough to swallow my form and raise the pulse of oceans. I turn around and scream into the void of me, the ache of being earthbound. My knees on the face of the dirt, my hands catching rain and salt. I am a living feeling of thank you. I tell her, showing me who to be here, showing me who to be here. Show me every way to love. Show me how to make my heart a river supply of everything you are. Show me every way to love because I get to be here. And that's just like, I mean, I read these and I sit there and I'm like, I wonder what the poem was initially about. Because when I read your poetry, I feel like it can be described through everybody's lives in different ways. Like you can have a perception of the poetry that you write, and it's not even about what you were doing. And that, like, this could be about an acorn in a storm. And I don't, but for me, yeah. But for me, it's like, it's just the beauty of being able to exist in all of this, no matter what it is. And, the storms and the rage and the everything that comes down, and we still get to exist through all of it. And I don't think a lot of people, I know for myself, for a long time, I didn't see that. I didn't see the beauty of it because of what my life looked like for me in the journey. My journey has not been an easy one. But I always forgot about the beauty part. I actually, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Collateral Beauty with Will Smith.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, and it's interesting because a lot of people, I can watch movies like that and I feel things through them, but I don't let it envelop me. And it's about a father who lost his daughter to cancer when she was 6 years old, and he has to go through all of these things. And the story of how he finds hope again and how he finds his life again, and all of that through all of these tragedies. I just feel like the connection between that and existing in this moment, like that, we just need to bridge that together even more. So, but yeah, so like your poems are just the perception of them. It's so fun to to look at it and be like, I wonder if she was just sitting in the forest and she was talking to a tree and she got this beautiful like idea.
Usually what happens is, if I'm being really honest, I'm usually sitting on my kitchen floor being climbed on
Yeah.
with like the third cup of coffee and like this urgency. It's this urgency of a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always know what the feeling is exactly. And I think that's why I write, is sometimes I have a hard time sometimes naming my feelings. And that, like, so that I'll overanalyze, and overthink, what am I feeling? What is this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there's this urgency that happens where if I take out a piece of paper, I'll get the feeling comes first, and then what happens is I get a vision. And sometimes the vision doesn't really make sense, but I start writing the first phrase that describes what I'm seeing, or what
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost like my eyes are open, I'm sitting here, but I'm not actually fully here. I'm almost like in a parallel dimension where I'm experiencing myself as something else.
Right.
And I call it writing the river, where I let the words take me rather than me trying to come up with the words. And sometimes I don't actually know what I'm writing until I finish. And then I read it out loud back to myself, and I rarely edit anything. So like pretty much everything in that book is untouched from the first time that I
That's
wrote it.
awesome.
And it's like, I do that because I feel like that's the purest expression from my heart. That is my heart, almost like bringing something through that's not necessarily me.
Yeah, it's your
Uh,
conduit.
right. A conduit, a channel, an oracle, whatever, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I am just the instrument. I am,
Mm-hmm.
what I like to say, like, I'm shaping the sound of the music, but I'm not the music itself. I am shaping the sound of it and delivering it and allowing it to land where it's meant to land.
That's awesome.
And so like of course, sometimes it's going to come through my human perception based on like what I've experienced in my life. Um, but still, I try to keep myself disconnected and detached just enough so that whatever I'm saying, there's more underneath what I'm actually saying. So like
Mhm.
it does resonate in some way universally, I hope.
It really does. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, and it's funny because some of the poems that you will put up on, like I'll see them on Instagram or Twitter, and they just sound so provocative. And then I'm like, I bet that was about a glass of milk. Like,
Wait,
or whatever. Yeah, like almond milk or
wait,
something.
the sexy provocative, or
Yeah.
like this? Oh no, those are usually about dreams or something.
Oh, nice. That's good too.
Yeah.
That's good too.
Oh yeah.
So, and I want to really talk about the unschooling and the forest therapy and all of that. We're coming up on an hour already. So I feel like I'm just going to have you come back on. Like,
Okay.
that's just what we're going to have to do. We're going to have you come
Yeah.
back on. Before we do wrap it up though, what with in all of this, finding the heart and living through the heart and teaching through the heart and poetry through the heart, what was the one piece of advice from anybody in your entire life that you can think about that has really helped you on your journey?
So I'm going to go back to Deborah Hanlon, who, had the center. And the one thing that she would always say, and this carried me through all of the surgeries, was, it is what it is until it isn't. And it's just this reminder that everything, the good and the bad, it's all temporary. Everything is temporary. It's all just like this.
Nice.
And yeah, it is what it is until it isn't. So for me, that's like, I don't have to attach myself to any of these circumstances. What I'll attach myself to is my heart and my knowing inside of who I am, and knowing that I will be who I am, whether things are going really well or things are really, really shaky.
Yeah.
I still have myself and I still have my heart, and I'm still always, always ceaselessly, infinitely connected to divine. And that's what I have.
Yes.
So
that's so important. I remember when I learned that lesson, that everything was temporary. It was so free. I felt like a freedom finally. I was like, wow, I literally don't have to worry about anything anymore.
yeah.
Because when you get to that place where it's just like for me, it was a little bit different. Because I held so much weight in the image that I was trying to put, because I thought, like, being a spiritual teacher, being an astrologer, I have to, really be this pillar for the community. And I did that for a very long time. And it's like, when you finally realize that you don't have to be anything for anybody except for yourself, and that every single day is a brand new day for you to start over again, I was just like, well, there it is this whole time.
You can just be a human. And
yeah.
Wow.
And we don't let each other be human. I think that that's really important, is we really just don't allow, we all talk about how we're souls living a human experience. And yet when we do human experience things that don't necessarily sit well with you, with other people, it becomes,
we punish each other for being human.
There's shame and punishment. And no wonder we're all so traumatized, because we've been told to the Hunger Games, fend for yourself.
Exactly.
May the odds be ever in your favor. Well, I really, truly appreciate your presence here. Thank you so much for taking the time for this. And I'm really excited to talk more about it. The Trove, that's wonderful. Like, I'm going to have to go look into some of that too, and see about it as well. Cause that's really, I used to write a lot when I was younger, and I stopped doing it probably for a lot of the same reasons why you didn't do it for a while. Life just got busy. And with my year, I started picking that up again, and I started writing a book and all of that stuff. And so I'm going to need some Jess prompts to help me along.
Oh my gosh. I'm on it.
So I'm going to put all the information for Jess's Patreon below in the description box, and your website and all of your socials and stuff like that. And thank you again so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I just adore you.
Oh, thanks. I'll see you on the Twitter side.
See you then.
All right. Bye.
Bye.